All right, we have more changes unfolding in U.S. maritime supply routes and critical infrastructure. Changes that have nobody talking about the elephant in the room following this Francis Scott Key Bridge disaster. What this means for the U.S. economy, for trade, for inflation, how the U.S. has really two main ports of entry that have real major significance for our supply lines. Two, that's it. One on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, and one was just taken out of play for years. This should be the story. How this isn't is mind-boggling. Folks, something else is happening here. We're going to show you what we mean, what you need to know, how to begin preparing for the impact to the U.S. economy. We'll also look at if this was in fact an accident, like the media is saying, or if it's deliberate, as this ship didn't collide with any of the other 600,000 bridges in this country. Instead, it collided with the single most consequential bridge, the only bridge that will collapse the U.S. supply chain. But before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps out the channel. And consider subscribing so you don't miss these regular updates. So let's start with this. What we just saw play out was one of the most consequential disasters on U.S. critical infrastructure in a very long time. The Francis Scott Key Bridge is not covering just any body of water, folks. This bridge collapse just blocked one of the busiest, really the most important port on the East Coast. The I-95 corridor on the eastern seaboard is what connects the north to the south. This is one of the most busiest important supply chains in the United States, and it was just shut down indefinitely. The only other one that's busier is on the West Coast in California. We're going to show you what happened last time we saw congestion at one of these two ports. That happened during COVID, and we all know the result. We're still dealing with the effects of that, higher interest rates, inflation, etc. The entire U.S. economy has just been dealt a major blow, and it's bizarre, to say the least, that that side of the story isn't being covered. There's a reason why this port in Baltimore is one of the busiest in the country, because certain types of containers that carry hazardous materials, come through this port. You may have heard about that aspect on the news, how many of these containers that were on this ship were hazardous. Also, much of the fuels that are imported come through this port. We're talking diesels, nitrogen, chemicals that are like refined fuels, the type of materials that are needed to move an economy. Business Insider's reporting this port is now closed indefinitely. I'm hearing 3 to 5 years at the earliest. They'll need to basically build an entirely new bridge. Realize this isn't just the port of Baltimore that's compromised. Anyone who says, oh, well, these container ships can just be rerouted to New York or some other port, don't understand what's happening. This is also the trucking industry, the railroads, commuters. The I-95 corridor is now cut off from north to south, or vice versa. I-95 runs all the way from Miami to Canada, one of the busiest and most heavily trafficked interstates in the U.S., relied on to move and haul these containers above ground. These trucks are now going to have to reroute, go around Baltimore, and they shut down the sea passage for all the hazardous material loads. Here's Lara Logan, investigative journalist, explain what she's hearing from her DHS contacts. Watch this.
Investigation telling you.
Well, I have a better question for you, Steve. Why are you coming to the mic telling the country that it's not when your own intelligence agencies are telling you it is? And I know they are, because I didn't make this up. These are not my words, right? I'm talking to people who are on the inside, some who are on active duty, some who are retired, and everyone, literally, from critical infrastructure in Department of Homeland Security to the intelligence agencies, they know there's no other. This is a cyber attack on a critical infrastructure corridor for the United States. This is, for those people who think this is just a river, this is in Baltimore, what does this matter? You don't know anything about what you're talking about.
Now, what's so odd about this is how the media doesn't ask any questions. The NTSB, for instance, just began their investigation into what happened. How they can come out so quickly, basically within minutes, and say, oh, there's no bad actor responsible. It's just odd. For example, how did the entire bridge collapse within seconds, like it was held up by chopsticks? Well, this is where it gets interesting. Scary, but interesting, because According to Dr. Sturgios Matoulis, head of the Structures Research Group, he says what happened here, the reason why the entire bridge just came down almost instantly, was how perfect the impact was. How if this ship would have hit the bridge anywhere else, it would have survived. But the fact that it hit one of the two main pylons, it had no chance, basically. Look at this. The bridge is 1.6 miles long. The ship collided on the bridge, and the pylon was not able to take the excessive collision dynamic load, and the bridge collapsed due to progressive collapse. Removing one support redistributes loads in the structure, akin to the way loads shift when standing on one leg. Thus, even though it might look as a disproportionate consequence, the pylon collapse would lead to entire bridge collapse in all cases. So what he's saying is, out of the 1.6 miles of bridge that ship happened to make impact with, it hit the one specific spot needed to take the entire thing down, the primary pylon that would lead to complete collapse 100% of the time. It's either very bad luck, terrible coincidence, or it was deliberate. A cyber attack, maybe. The actors knew the specific location and make impact to cause the most damage. Again, here's Lara Logan explain what she's been told from her DHS source. Listen to this.
Okay, I want to go. You just had this big thing with the FBI talking about what the Chinese Communist Party's cyber hacking unit that they've been monitoring for 10 years, and now they're saying it's out of control. Are your sources telling you that they feel there's enough information out there that it is a cyber attack, and is it a state actor or non-state actors?
100%, yes. They are saying that this is a cyber attack. You didn't have a terrorist group board the ship and commandeer it and take it over. You had somebody hack into the systems on board the ship, the GPS system, and reroute that ship. They did it in the middle of the night because they didn't want the crew to be awake. They didn't want everybody to be on full high alert. They wanted everybody to be asleep and you trying to wake people up and rouse people, because when I spoke to one individual who has, let's just say he worked in Baltimore for many, many years and was there when that bridge was opened. He knew when he looked at the security camera video of the harbor, the long version, the 7 minutes, he knew from the start of that video when he looked at that ship that it was not in the channel. You need to be in the channel to make that turn, to have any chance of making that turn. So now you're traveling. That is a river that flows pretty quickly, Steve, even under normal circumstances, right? And at a certain point, you're committed. That ship is heavy, the load is heavy, the water is flowing at a certain speed. You've got very little room to maneuver. So at a certain point, there was absolutely nothing that they could do to stop that ship from the course that it was on, because they were not in control of it. And they had all of these other factors coming into play. So anybody could come out now when they haven't had time to do an investigation, when I know for a fact that they're getting people inside their agencies that are telling them what they're telling me, and they're making public statements that completely contradict what anybody who knows this terrain, who knows it, and I don't just mean the physical terrain, I mean the cyber terrain, and the terrorism terrain, and the critical infrastructure terrain, and all of that.
Again, was this a cyber attack or some deliberate act? I have no idea. It could be what the media is saying, a complete accident, but the part that I'm having real trouble with is how nobody's reporting the economic damage that's in store because of this. I happen to know about this. I did a lot of research on our supply chains during COVID last year and saw what happens when you have congestion at these two main ports. One of them being on the East Coast, that being Baltimore, the other is on the West Coast, and if either of them begins to slow down, we see massive disruption. The effects ripple through the entire economy, like what you see here. Goldman Sachs tracks U.S. supply chain congestion for this reason, and any bottlenecks in container ships accessing these ports. If you look back in 2021, look what happened. Massive bottlenecks began appearing. That was all during COVID, of course. And that was around the same time when inflation began to spike, hitting around 9% only months after that began. It took a long time for all this to get ironed out, for the supply chains to begin working normally again. So look, why the U.S. government publicly is stating there's no evidence of malicious intent around this bridge collapse before they've even investigated it. Again, NTSB just launched the investigation. How could they know that already? They can't. What they do know, however, is that an attack on U.S. critical infrastructure is an act of war. It's serious. It demands some type of official response, something that the Biden administration can't afford right now. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened. I don't know what happened. But I am saying that Ukraine has been using U.S. weapons attacking Russian critical infrastructure. They've been doing this openly with little reaction from U.S. leadership. And a cyber attack, like what some people are suggesting, could be responsible for this bridge collapse. That would be invisible. Cyber attacks aren't flashy unless they're reported on or the bad actor takes credit. Otherwise, there's no way to know it's not some awful accident that we're all witnessing. And what happened in this case was the ship's electrical system was malfunctioning. They believed they were losing power, preventing them from steering the ship. I don't know. Let me know what you think. All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.